The subcommittee will come to order. A quorum being present, the committee shall come to order. Today we're meeting to consider H.R. 2631, the Nuclear Forensics and Attribution Act. And I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. The subcommittee will mark up an amendment in the nature of a substitute, H.R. 2631, the Nuclear Forensics and Attribution Act. I'd like to begin by congratulating my colleague, Congressman Adam Schiff of California, for introducing this legislation and for working collaboratively with me to develop the amendment in the nature of a substitute we'll consider today. The Nuclear Forensics and Attribution Act expresses the sense of Congress that the President should, first, pursue bilateral and multilateral agreements to establish an international framework for determining the source of any confiscated nuclear material or weapon, as well as the source of any detonated weapon or the nuclear material used in such a weapon. Next, develop protocols for the dissemination of sensitive information relating to nuclear materials and samples of controlled nuclear materials to the extent required by such agreements, and to develop expedited protocols for the dissemination of sensitive information needed to publicly identify the source of a nuclear detonation. It also amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to task the Secretary with the development of methods to attribute nuclear or radiological material, both within the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office and in the partnership with other federal agencies to its source when such material is intercepted by the United States, foreign governments, or international bodies, or dispersed in the course of a nuclear terrorist attack or other nuclear or radiological explosion. The amendment in the nature of a substitute builds on and strengthens these ideas by emphasizing the development of a robust nuclear forensics capability will develop chiefly on an expertly trained workforce in this area, and the recognition that our workforce in this area is currently waning and that we must turn this trend around. It also tasks the Secretary of Homeland Security to act as the integrator and steward of our national nuclear forensics capabilities. While it is a certainty that the cooperation of all the agencies represented here is needed for success in this mission, clearly specifying these duties for the Secretary should provide the needed leadership for success. The amendment further requires the Secretary to report annually to Congress on the activities of the interagency group, as well as the development and maintenance of the needed expert workforce. And finally, it authorizes $20 million per year for the next 3 fiscal years for this effort. I'd also like to, at this time, thank Ranking Member McCall of Texas for his contributions on many of the topics just mentioned to strengthen the underlying bill. I appreciate his efforts, and I'm certainly pleased that this subcommittee continues to be a model of bipartisanship. With that, I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman for Texas, Mr. McCall, for the purpose of making an opening statement.
I thank the chairman for your comments and your leadership on the subcommittee. I support this bill as a co-sponsor. As we heard in the hearing on October the 10th, the shrinking workforce in the area of nuclear forensics is a cause for great concern. A sustainable pipeline of experts is necessary for a credible program of technical nuclear forensics and attribution. Among other things, this bill instructs the Secretary in partnership with other agencies to develop and maintain a robust and enduring nuclear forensics workforce. This bill is a good first step in turning around the decline in this area, and hopefully other committees and federal agencies will work with us as we continue to bring awareness and support to this very important issue. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'd like to remind the committee that other members may submit opening statements for the record. And I now call up H.R. 2631, the Nuclear Forensics and Attribution Act, as introduced and referred to the Committee on Homeland Security. The bill was circulated in advance, and without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The clerk will now report the title of the legislation.
H.R. 2631, to strengthen efforts in the Department of Homeland Security to develop nuclear forensics capabilities to permit attribution of the source of nuclear material.
Per my agreement with the ranking member, the committee will use a roster for amendments today. And I will now yield to the ranking member.
Reserving the right to object, and I will not object, I will ask the chair to explain our agreement concerning amendments.
The committee will first take up amendments in the order listed on the amendment roster. In addition, amendments that are not on the roster may be offered after there has been an opportunity for amendments on the roster to be offered to the extent practicable and not prohibited by House or committee rules.
I thank the chairman for explaining our agreement on procedure, and I withdraw my reservation.
Thank you. And just to continue, in the event the member is not present to offer an amendment, the chair will allow the member to offer the amendment when the member returns to the extent practicable and not prohibited by the House or committee rules. I appreciate the gentleman's inquiry. We will now proceed with consideration of the legislation. Without objection, the bill is considered as read for the purposes of amendment, and the bill is considered open for amendment at any point. The clerk will designate Section 1.
Section 1, short title.
Okay. In advance of today's markup, I circulated an amendment in the nature of a substitute containing several additions and changes to the bill as introduced. Copies are in the members' packets at their seats. Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read for the purposes of further amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2631, offered by Mr. Langevin of Rhode Island.
I now recognize myself to briefly explain the highlights of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The amendment in the nature of a substitute builds on and strengthens the base bill by emphasizing that the development of a robust nuclear forensics capability will depend chiefly on an expertly trained workforce in this area, and the recognition that a workforce in this area is currently waning and that we must turn this trend around. Tasking the Secretary of Homeland Security to act as the integrator and steward of our national nuclear forensics capabilities. While it is a certainty that the cooperation of all the agencies represented here is needed for the success of this mission, clearly specifying this duty for the Secretary should provide the needed leadership for success. Next, further requiring the Secretary report annually to Congress on the activities of the interagency group, as well as the development and maintenance of the needed expert workforce, and authorizing $20 million per year for the next 3 fiscal years in this effort. Again, in closing, I'd like to again thank the ranking member for his help and support with the amendment in the nature of a substitute as it further strengthens and improves this important legislation. Is there any discussion?
So as I understand, I can either object or not, and if I don't object, we'll go forward. How would it have to? Because they're telling me I need to object, but I don't know if I. Sir, we'll do is we have enough to approve the ENS. We do not have a measure up to the full committee, so we'll do. Should that be the chair's comments if it's for the improvement to report to the full constitution? Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Hearing no discussion.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word, if I may, please.
The gentleman's text is recognized.
Thank you. First, let me commend you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member for this outstanding piece of legislation. I'm always impressed with the bipartisanship that we seem to manifest at this level, especially on this committee. And would like to just briefly, if I may, make an inquiry about some of the interagency cooperation that's taken place to help us get this piece of legislation drafted to the extent that we have.
It is my understanding that we have had input and involvement of the Department of Energy as well as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. As well as FBI and DHS.
I only ask a question because I just want to commend them as well for the team effort that went into making it happen.
I appreciate the gentleman's comments, and I'll make point noting that the Department of Energy has been the lead agency in many ways to have most substantive comments. And since they have the expertise and past experience, they were invaluable in this process. It's important for anyone that would think that they could use nuclear radiological material against this nation to know that it does come, so to speak, with a return address. And God forbid were a terrorist to smuggle nuclear material into the country and to be used in either a nuclear device or a radiological dirty bomb, that would be a nuclear signature that would allow us to trace back to the source of that material, and would hopefully lead to attribution of how it was obtained and used against this country.
I appreciate the colloquy, Mr. Chairman, and I think this helps us immensely with the so-called loose nukes that we have been so much concerned about. It at least causes persons to have some degree of consternation as they handle this type of material.
I'd also make the point that the Department of State has had and does play a significant role in this effort, as they're the lead agency dealing with our foreign partners and other governments, and helping us to obtain this nuclear forensics database. And again, they work with our international partners in both securing their nuclear material stockpiles and other such related materials. So we appreciate their input as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Is there any other discussion?
The gentleman would yield.
Is recognized.
I was looking here under Section 3 with the sense of Congress on international attribution of agreements. Would the gentleman care to share with us that area? Because that is it seems to me that's the critical component if this is going to work. We do have to have the international agreement. It's great to have our Secretary of State, Homeland Security, and others doing, but unless we can develop the kind of international relationship between government to government within our agencies, it's going to be very difficult. And I think this gives some framework for that kind of relationship. It's going to be critical to making it work.
I couldn't agree more. It is going to take great agreement and cooperation with foreign governments, and there are some agreements that are in place, but they can always be strengthened, and that will be part of the effort as we go forward. It will truly be only as successful as we are in assembling a complete, comprehensive database, and as I said, that will require the cooperation and support of all concerned governments that have nuclear radiological material within their own possession, their borders.
Well, let me thank the gentleman, because I think this is a critical piece. Certainly, probably in no time in history have we had better communications internationally, and yet at the same time, we have to strengthen those relationships so that this is one issue. If there is a vulnerability, I think most people fear this as much or more than anything else that could happen on our shores. With that, I'd yield back. Thank you.
Good. I thank the gentleman for his comments. Is there any other discussion? Are there any other amendments? With that, no other amendments. We will end the markup. Let me just see if there are there's no further discussion. The question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by the gentleman from Rhode Island, the chair. Are those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Well, we've voted on it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I just have a question. It would seem to me, when you read through this legislation, 2631, and read through the substitute as well, that we purposely have stayed away from the issue of proliferation of nuclear weapons. It would seem to me that this committee, which has responsibilities and mission very, very succinctly defined, should be very concerned and very adamant about the proliferation of such nuclear weapons, increasing the necessity of forensic study, that this is the best way to defend America and its allies is not to, in any manner, shape, or form, stand aside when there is discussion of proliferation of nuclear weapons. And I was wondering if there was any feeling about from the chairman or the ranking member about the subject, because I intend to bring it up.
Well, I certainly agree with the gentleman. This, unfortunately, is a more narrow focus, and I would certainly be willing to work with the gentleman on his concerns. This will address one aspect of nuclear proliferation, and again, assigning attribution were the materials that have to be used. But I couldn't agree more that that we can always step up our efforts to do more to secure nuclear material at other sources.
Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman is recognized.
What exactly is the policy of the United States as far as countries obtaining nuclear weaponry? What is the policy?
Well, we have, in terms of securing and working with other countries, making sure that they're securing their nuclear stockpiles, if that's the question. There are, I believe, 3 such programs, both at DOD, Department of State, and Department of Energy, that work collaboratively with foreign governments, most notably the former Soviet Union and in particularly Russia, in working to make sure that their nuclear stockpiles are secure. And as the gentleman knows, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars working with those governments to try to better secure their nuclear stockpiles.
In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would just think that if we are, and we are legitimately concerned about the sources of the nuclear material, that a parallel interest, I think, and I may suggest, that we be as concerned about the proliferation of nuclear weapons, because what we're doing here is we're saying that we want to know the source, where this came from, God forbid if anything does happen, be it smaller or larger nuclear weapons, but we want to also contain in whatever way we can through international agreement the proliferation of the building of nuclear weapons, and not simply with certain countries. That's what it appears to. So, you know, we're like chasing our tail here. We're saying we want to go after, we want to know where the source of the nuclear weapon is coming from, where this is coming from, but we're not at the same time speaking to the issue of whether or not more nuclear weapons are going to be permitted through international discourse to be built in the first place. It seems to me they go hand in hand, and I would ask the committee to address this issue.
Mr. Chairman?
The ranking member is recognized.
I'd like to associate myself with the gentleman from New Jersey's remarks. This is the Emerging Threats Subcommittee. I believe that nuclear proliferation is an obvious emerging threat, and I would ask that the chairman consider exploring this area. I know that the predecessor subcommittee in the last Congress to this committee studied the issue, held hearings on the issue, and I think it would be appropriate for us to examine that as well.
Well, I agree with the gentleman, and both on the proliferation issue as well as securing nuclear material at its source. Clearly, much of the world's attention has been focused on the development of nuclear weapons by North Korea, and so we have a successful agreement there to get North Korea to suspend development of its nuclear program. Much of the world's attention also is on diplomatic efforts right now to try to prevent the development of nuclear weapons by Iran, and this will be an ongoing issue. as certainly more and more nations, when and if they tried to consider developing a nuclear weapons program, the idea of nuclear proliferation concerns me, as it does the gentleman from New Jersey and the ranking member. And since clearly this is the Emerging Threats Subcommittee, we will take up this issue at a future hearing. Hearing no further amendments, the question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The question now occurs on adoption of the bill as amended. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill as amendment is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now move that the bill as amended be forwarded to the full committee for consideration. All those who are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill as amended will be forwarded to the full committee. And without objection, the title is amended, and the staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. That there being no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.